All right, we are waiting for the stream to get fired up on all cylinders. Looks like we're online. Looks like we're online. Looks like we're online. Looks like we're online. Looks like what just happened there? Let me make sure we're online. Got to make sure the stream is fired up. Don't know why it's redirecting me. Hang on a second here, folks. My apologies. All right. So it looks like we're broadcasting now. My streaming service just had some sort of a weird thing. It's kind of making me, it's playing myself as I'm trying to monitor myself, but it does look like we are online. So Miss Faith, if you are experiencing a problem, come let me know. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney, and the reason we started this show is because my team and I, over the course of many years, we've represented thousands of people facing criminal charges and going through the justice system. And over the course of that representation, we've seen a lot of problems in our justice system, particularly with police officers, prosecutors, judges, politicians, anybody involved in the justice system. They can be prone to some misconduct and some malfeasance. And so what we want to do is be a part of the solution. We want to add some value and help the justice system improve and move forward. And one of the ways we can do that is by shining the beautiful sunlight, the transparent light down upon some of this misconduct so that we can root it out, hold everybody accountable. And we're talking about holding them accountable under the same system of justice that you or I would be under if we were facing charges like many of these other people. And so today we're going to dive into more of that. We've got some criminal justice news for sure. We're going to be talking about Breonna Taylor. The grand jury transcripts, the grand jury recordings, in fact, were released today, and we know a little bit more about what the warrant situation looks like, and it's not looking too good. So I've got some charts and some diagrams I want to run you through. We do not have a lot of the audio recordings that are clipped out because the audio is really bad and it's not really that good for YouTube, but we do have some indication of what's in there. It's about 15 to 20 hours of material, and the internet is currently combing through that as we speak. So got some updates on that. We also have some updates on Daniel Prude. Daniel Prude, if you remember, was the gentleman who was killed by the police officers in Rochester, New York. Now they have the 6 or 7 cops who were involved in that situation. They, of course, hired counsel, so they've got some defense attorneys, and those defense attorneys came out very recently and sort of detailed what their defense is going to be. So we have a clip from these interesting defense attorneys, and then we've got some actual video evidence and photograph evidence to refute what they're claiming happened on that night. But before we dive into any of that, we of course have to talk about what is going on with the president. So as we all know, Donald Trump has come down with the coronavirus, COVID-19, as has Melania Trump. So, not a good situation. We just literally, as we were sitting down to start this broadcast, Donald Trump posted a video. This was literally 29 minutes ago on Twitter. I have not seen it yet, but I think it's a video saying how we're doing well. Thanks for the support. Let's take a quick look because this was just posted. You may have missed it. This is from Donald Trump just this afternoon on Twitter.
I want to thank everybody for the tremendous support. I'm going to Walter Reed Hospital. I think I'm doing very well, but we're going to make sure that things work out. The First Lady is doing very well. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will never forget it. Thank you.
All right. So people are calling for him to make a statement. I've seen a lot of people actually on Twitter talking about it also, saying this is time for a national address. If he's really capable of executing the office of the presidency, that he needs to come out and calm the nerves of all of the citizens who are worried about what's going on with the government. Now, I don't think that that's particularly necessary at this stage. From what we've seen in the news, his symptoms are very mild. There's been some indications he's got a fever, he's got a cough, kind of the standard stuff that people with COVID are experiencing, but he is in that higher risk category. He's getting a lot of, grief about, being overweight. He's got a lot of, grief about being in his 70s. And so, to me, the guy has enough energy to be in his 30s. I see what he does, and it is extremely impressive. And, that's not an understatement. Doing 3 rallies a day and all sorts of stuff is impressive. So Very optimistic, but of course we want to wish the president and his wife and the White House and anybody in our government who, is contracting this thing, or anybody in the United States who's contracted this thing, very well. And so, it's one of those things that kind of feels gross that we have to talk about it, but we do, because we're going to have to talk about the politics. If the president, there's a lot of issues that come up right now. The president just recently was at a nomination announcement for Amy Coney Barrett to replace Judge Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. Many people are calling that sort of this super spreader event where you had all these high profile people gathering together in the Rose Garden to celebrate the nomination to nominate Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. And so if everybody was there and everybody's getting sick, what's that going to do for a lot of things? What's that going to do for the country, right? If President Donald Trump is incapacitated or killed because of the coronavirus, what's going to happen? So we have the 25th Amendment. We're going to run through that. We're going to talk about what would happen in the event that this goes the wrong way for the president. We're also going to talk about specifically what's going to happen with SCOTUS, so the Supreme Court of the United States. And then another big question is what's happening with the election? Are we going to have debates 2 and 3? We've got some more news on that also. So if you don't recall, if you're not up to speed on the story, late last night, Donald Trump actually indicated that he and the First Lady of the United States have tested positive for COVID-19. He said they're going to begin our quarantine recovery process immediately. We will get through this together. So, that was kind of a shock to a lot of people. Everybody was sort of, still reeling with a hangover from the Tuesday night debate. And then on Thursday, we have Donald Trump comes out and says, hey, we've got the coronavirus. So everybody was last night going, oh my gosh, and Twitter was mayhem. We had some people on one side of the aisle who were wishing him a speedy death. Other people saying they wish him a speedy recovery. And so, anytime this happens, you can see some of the worst contingent of humanity come out and wish death upon other people. I've seen it from people, who are my quote friends on Facebook. We've seen it all over Twitter. Really gross behavior. We talk about this concept a lot on this channel. Why are we seeing man's inhumanity to man? Why is man inhumane to other men and women? That's the phrase, but it applies to all genders. Why are we being inhumane to other people? I can understand having a lot of disagreements with President Trump and Melania Trump. I do have a lot of disagreements with them, but they are at the head of the country. They are leading the country at this moment. And so we're all on the same team as far as I'm concerned. When I used to play sports, the analogy that I was thinking of was you may really dislike the person who's on your team, but who's the running back on the other side of the field. You may absolutely despise that person off the field, but when it comes game time, you're both on the same team. You both need to score the point. You both need to work together to get it done, and that's what this feels like to me. Unfortunately, that is not the same sentiment across the country. So we had indication from Donald Trump that there is, he does have the coronavirus. Shortly thereafter, we got a message from his physician. So this was released yesterday, very late. The memorandum was for Kayleigh McEnany, and she was the press secretary. We also have indication, that this is going. Well, this is who this is from. Sean Conley, who is the doctor, and he says, "I released the following information with President's permission, Lady Trump's permission. This evening, I received confirmation they both have tested positive for SARS-CoV-2, the virus. At this time, they plan to remain at home within the White House during their convalescence. The White House medical team and I will maintain a vigilant watch. We appreciate the support," and so on. Just this afternoon, there was another statement, which is interesting, that they're going to be trying some sort of new experimental, less than tested types of treatments. So a new update from Sean Conley, the doctor to the president. "I released the following information once again with the president. Following PCR confirmation of the president's diagnosis," meaning they ultra confirmed that he's got this thing. "As a precautionary measure, he received a single dose of Regeneron's polyclonal antibody cocktail," which I have not heard of. If you're not familiar on the show, I'm not sure if I've talked about this, but I actually had a family member, my younger brother, who has Down syndrome. He was in the hospital with COVID for 48 days. So my family has a lot of experience going through this thing, and I am very intimately familiar with all of the variety of treatments that he had when he was in the hospital this past 48 days. He's well, he's home, he's doing okay now, but this is not something I've heard of. and neither did my family. So something new is out there. It's, on the horizon. He says, in addition, polyclonal antibodies. The president has been taking zinc, vitamin D, fatidinidine. You can tell I'm not a doctor. Melatonin, daily aspirin. This afternoon, he remains fatigued but in good spirits. He's being evaluated by a team of experts, and together we'll be making recommendations for them both. Lady Trump remains well with only a mild cough and headache. The remainder of the first family have been tested negative today. So good news. I think that this is probably going to have a good outcome. We have seen some stories from other world leaders around the world who have also gotten it and recovered from it. So they catch these things extremely early for these world leaders. They are, of course, going to be getting the best medical treatment that is available. And so, we're obviously hopeful for an optimistic outcome on that. But that is just one part of the issue. There's a lot of ramifications. There's a lot of, spillover that needs to be dealt with in the political realm, in the judicial realm, and, for the country, because this is a big thing. People are questioning what's going to happen. The White House Chief of Staff has said that he's well enough to continue his duties. This came out today. Sort of old news, I think, at this point. We clipped this earlier in the morning. Let's see what he has to say.
As all of you know, the President and the First Lady tested positive for COVID-19. They remain in good spirits. The President does have mild symptoms, and as we look to try to make sure that not only his health and safety and welfare is good, we continue to look at that for all of the American people. He continues to be not only in good spirits but very energetic. We've talked a number of times this morning. I got the 5 or 6 things that he had tasked me to do, like I do every single morning, and he is certainly wanting to make sure that we stay engaged. I think the other thing that is critically important, the doctors continue to monitor both his health and the health of the First Lady. We'll continue to do that. They'll be glad.
So, it's good news that the idea that he's still, sending out tasks and all that stuff. So sounds like it's mostly business as usual. We know that just recently he just got transferred over to Walter Reed, aborted Marine One, took the helicopter over there. So he's now being surrounded by an entire entourage of very highly trained, some of the best medical professionals in the world. So certainly wish him well. Now, the reaction across the internet has been interesting. We see some very interesting messaging going on. I've been seeing a lot of these photographs of President Trump with little spittles coming out of his mouth, like he's this walking death machine now that he's got coronavirus. And, to be honest, we kind of experienced this in my family. I never got tested. I never got any symptoms for it. I'm totally fine as far as I know. But the issue was my mom got it, my stepfather got it. And so as they were going around and sort of entering into the world, people, once they know that you have it, they sort of treat you like a leper, like you're sort of a subhuman to a certain degree. I mean, that was at least our experience with it, or their experience as they were relaying it to me. So, kind of a weird thing. And I'm not sure if any of you have had it out there, if you've experienced that same thing either. But, this is sort of what we're seeing now, is that a lot of the political reaction is that anybody who is around Trump is now off limits. Everybody has to be quarantined. Everything needs to go away. We need to stop everything and lock everything down, including the Supreme Court nomination process, the confirmation process. So we've got some letters that we're going to go through from Dianne Feinstein and some of the other senators. But you can see here, the New York Times is sort of indicating Trump is throwing this MAGA hat into the crowd. He's contaminating them with his MAGA virus, kind of throwing that right into the crowd. And, there's some subliminal messaging. We've had some callous sort of reporting from the Washington Post. This was posted about 1 hour after Donald Trump made his announcements. And imagine what it would be like to never have to think about Trump again. And just totally unnecessary, totally gross. I think they deleted that tweet per Andy NGO, but still, it's gross stuff to me. Anytime we see this type of stuff, it's just, I can't imagine myself doing that. It doesn't matter who the president was, even if if this was Hillary Clinton, if this was Barack Obama, if this was Joe Biden, I just can never imagine myself just waking up and saying, God, I hope that person drops dead today. I just can't imagine it. But feels like half of the Twitter universe is of that mindset. So if they're comfortable living that way, I guess they can continue on. But I certainly do not want to live with that sort of vitriol in my heart. And I would hope that other people would try to exercise that out of theirs as well. We have a couple things to talk about. SCOTUS. So Senator Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate Judiciary Committee, actually the leader of the majority leader for the entire Senate, has indicated that in light of this news, they're moving forward. They're not slowing down Amy Coney Barrett's nomination at all. He tweeted just today, this morning early, he said, just finished a great phone call with POTUS. He's in good spirits. We talked business, especially how impressed senators are with the qualifications of Judge Barrett. Full steam ahead with the fair, thorough, timely process that the nominee, the court, and the country deserve. So Senate Republicans, full steam ahead, not missing a beat on it. The Senate Democrats, however, they want to slow this down. We shared a letter, I think, yesterday from the ranking Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee who had indicated that it's just simply not enough time. We went through it yesterday. Senator Dianne Feinstein said that she needed more time to check out Amy Coney Barrett's background. Apparently, when she was interviewing her during the Seventh Circuit confirmation hearing, she didn't get to ask all of her questions at that point in time, so she wants more time. Lindsey Graham has said that they're going to push this thing really through quickly with a court a confirmation hearing date, not a court date, on October 12th. And now Feinstein and Schumer are wanting to slow that down even further. This letter was posted today. Their response to the confirmation, they said, hey, Dianne Feinstein, Chuck Schumer, today they released a statement. It's premature for Chairman Grand to commit to a hearing schedule. We don't know the full extent of potential exposure stemming from the president's infection. So this is where the president is becoming a leper, right? Anybody who touched him is now sort of off limits because of the potential that they are infected. They before the White House put in place their contact tracing, the unfortunate news about the infection of our colleague, Senator Mike Lee, who is on the Senate Judiciary Committee, makes even more clear that health and safety must guide the schedule for all Senate activities, including the hearings. In addition, there's a bipartisan agreement that a virtual confirmation hearing for a lifetime appointment to the federal bench is not an acceptable substitute. So they're saying we're not going to do any of this stuff virtually. All circuit court nominees have appeared in the past. There's far more at stake here for the American people. The Affordable Care Act, being struck down, health care, It's critical that Chairman Graham put the health of the senators, the nominee, and the staff first to ensure a full and fair hearing and so on. So what they're saying is, there's a possibility that there's some other senators that might have this thing. Therefore, we got to cancel everything. We got to cancel the whole hearings until everybody's been quarantined for 14 days. So this is sort of a dream come true excuse for them to just really put the brakes on the nomination process. Now, I don't think that it's going to go anywhere. I think, the Republicans, without any evidence that there's somebody who's got this thing, they still have the majority in the Senate. They still have the majority on the Senate Judiciary Committee. So they make the rules and they can, push this thing through if they want to, which we've already indicated that they will. The other thing that I was thinking about when we heard about Trump having this is, while he was just literally on the Rose Garden of the White House with Amy Coney Barrett, what if, if it's not the senators who catch this thing, what if it's Amy Coney Barrett who actually gets this thing and she can't come before the Senate Judiciary Hearing Committee in order to testify during the confirmation process, right? That would be a big, big problem. Well, fortunately for her and for the Republicans, it looks like she's already had this thing. So this story came from the Washington Post. Amy Coney Barrett, she was tested positive for the coronavirus this summer and has since recovered. So again, from the Washington Post, you can look that up. She tested positive earlier this year. Two of the people she tested positive for, or two of the officials said she tested positive over the summer. All of the people spoke on condition of anonymity because they're not allowed to talk about healthcare, right? It's a HIPAA violation. You're not allowed to discuss other people, doctors can't go and disclose private information about your health because of the privacy rules. So here, the White House declined to comment. They said, again, for the same reason, they're saying she's being tested daily now. She most recently had a negative test on Friday morning. That was according to the White House Press Secretary Judd Deere. So if this is accurate, and I have no reason to doubt that it isn't, but if it is, then from what we seem to know, what we think we know about the coronavirus, it's unlikely that she's going to get it again. There is a contingent of the medical community, or at least of the Twitter experts, or the social media experts, or the journalists who think they're experts, is that there is a possibility that you could actually contract this thing after the antibodies wear off, but we don't know if there's any evidence of that. Regardless, I'm going to guess that Amy Coney Barrett is probably on ultra lockdown, meaning she's not, not touching her family, her kids, which is really hard for a person in that position. She's got 7 kids, loves being a mom, obviously. So to be locked away from all of the people you care about for the next 3 weeks while you're going through this confirmation process is a tall order for anybody. So we wish her well on that. So Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearing sounds like it's going forward, full steam ahead. The final, or the next question before we get to the ultimate question is, what about the debates? Are the debates going to go on? So if you do the math on it, Trump announced that he was positive for the coronavirus yesterday on October 1st. By my recollection, the CDC is saying that anybody who has this thing or was in contact with other people needs to quarantine for the 14 days, right? That's the number we keep hearing. So if Trump kicks this thing out and he's virus free, and he's quarantined for those 14 days, the next debate is scheduled on October 15th. So per the CDC guidelines, is he going to be clear to go to the October 15th date? He got it on the October 1st, waits 14 days, 1 + 4 is 15. So on October 15th, if he's ready to rock and roll, is he going to go and show up to the debates? Sounds like he'd be within the CDC guidelines, so we'll see. That would be sort of a big move, right, for the Trump campaign. They do certainly need some energy, and that would be interesting to see how that debate goes, if he's capable to move forward with it or if it's going to be canceled. I thought that it was for sure going to be canceled, but we just took a screenshot of the news statement from the Commission on Presidential Debates, and we don't see a news statement. So the last statement that they had was from September 30th, which was, I think, the day after the debate. And if you read that statement, it's basically saying, we're sorry for the disaster train wreck of a debate. We're going to try to do better next time. So at this point in time, I have not confirmed that the debates have been canceled per the CPD, the Commission on Presidential Debates. But maybe they will be, maybe they won't. Or maybe they already have been, I just haven't seen it. But it is going to be something to consider, because it's going to obviously come right on the back end of Trump having the coronavirus. The last major thing, of course, the biggest thing of all, is what if something happens? What if this thing goes off the tracks? What if Donald Trump gets ultimately sick that he can't actually conduct the office anymore? He can't maintain that. What's going to happen? A lot of people are talking about the 25th Amendment. So we have that pulled up here. Want to run through that with you briefly so you can understand how this works. The 25th Amendment was officially ratified in 1967. So not that long ago. Okay, most of our amendments are older than that. This is one of the more recent amendments. There's only 27, I think, total amendments in the Constitution. And so this one is one of the most recent, one of the sort of, less tested. We haven't really had a lot of experience with this thing because it's only been around since 1967. It's been sort of used a couple times. It's been officially used when George W. Bush was in office. He gave the presidency, or the power of the presidency, twice over to Dick Cheney for just a few hours. He had a colonoscopy 2 times, and he had to go under general anesthesia for a couple hours, so he went under. And during that time, there was that sort of official temporary transfer of power, and then he took it back when he came up out of anesthesia. And that's sort of how this is supposed to work. There was another situation with Ronald Reagan. If you remember, Ronald Reagan was shot. He was John Hinckley attempted to assassinate him, didn't succeed, fortunately. And there was that period of time where Ronald Reagan was rushed into the hospital. His vice president, who was George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr. at the time, was the vice president. He was on an airplane. And so there was talk of needing to invoke the 25th Amendment to bring the cabinet members together so that they could take control of the presidency away from Ronald Reagan, because he was incapacitated. He couldn't have voluntarily given it to the vice president, like George Bush voluntarily gave it to George Bush voluntarily gave it to Dick Cheney. Ronald Reagan was shot, so he didn't have the chance to think through, or the wherewithal to hand it over to George Bush. So they were talking about trying to, execute the 25th Amendment, but they didn't do it. And so it was sort of used, but by the time George Bush landed, Ronald Reagan was already out of surgery, and so it kind of became moot at that point. So this is the 25th Amendment, not a very long amendment, but a little bit confusing, so let's run through it. When we talk about Section 1, we're going to say that in the case of removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president, right? So if the president dies, the vice president becomes the president. We all know that. Section 2, when there is a vacancy in the office of the president shall nominate a vice president who shall take office upon confirmation. So if something happens to the vice president, the president nominates somebody, gets just a simple majority vote in Congress, and we get a new vice president. This is where we start talking about what's more relevant today. Section 3, whenever the president transmits to the president pro temp of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers of his duties of office, and until he transmits them a written declaration to the contrary, such power shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. All right, so what does that say? It says that the president is officially, formally going to notify the Senate and the Speaker of the House by a written declaration that he cannot be president anymore. He's saying, I can't execute the duties of my office. He's going to, in a written declaration, transmit it over to them, and then at that point in time, the vice president becomes the acting president, right? Thereafter, under Section 4, so there's a different section, it says when the vice president, so this is something, so Section 3, the president initiates that. The president says, I'm going to give up my office, the power of my office. Section 4 is where the cabinet takes it away from the president, so they pull it away. Whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or whatever body Congress decides, when they notify the Senate and the Speaker that the president is unable to discharge, then the vice president shall assume and become the acting president. So when the cabinet, when the executive departments and the vice president notify Congress, then the power can be taken away from the presidency. And this has not been used before. Very close with Reagan, but it has not officially been used. When the president transmits to the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House his written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume the powers. So once that power is taken away from the president can challenge it and he gets it back. And then a majority of either both of the Congress may transmit back to the Senate, to the Speaker, that the president is unable. And then they basically have this little bit of a kind of a trial that goes on. If Congress is not in session and they can determine by 2/3 vote of both houses that the president is unable, and then the vice president becomes acting president. So it's sort of this back and forth. The president, if the cabinet and the vice president think he's not eligible or he cannot continue to maintain the duties of his office, they can initiate the removal of powers. The president also has the option to challenge that. Then it goes up to Congress for a 2/3 vote whether or not to actually remove the president, and the vice president would take his spot. So a really big hurdle there. Okay, we talk about whether this can happen in today's age. Do we think that we can get 2/3 votes of both the House and the Senate? That the president, Donald Trump, is unable to discharge his duties? I think it would have to get really, really bad. This is, we have a quick shot of a couple things. This is the Trump's cabinet that we see here. So a lot of people on there. This is from their own website. We got Mike Pompeo. We've got, people that John Ratcliffe. We've got Ben Carson on there. A couple other big names. All of these people, Bill Barr. We've got Mike Pence on that list. We've got Steve Mnuchin. All these, Elizabeth Davos from the Secretary of Education. All these people, I think, are very loyal to Trump. I don't think that there's any indication that they want to remove him from office. So I think it would have to get very bad. And then in order for the willpower to exist in the House and the Senate, it would need to be 2/3 of that. And so the Republicans are currently in control of the Senate. I think it'd be very hard to pull off essentially, if you have half, you'd need about 1/6 of those Republicans to switch that balance. And I just don't think that is going to happen. So we will see. This is going to be something that has the ability, in my mind, to change the entire dynamic of the election. We're going to see what happens. I read a story that a lot of the other world leaders who did have the coronavirus, their approval ratings changed. People look at you differently when you have something like this going on. A lot of the criticism, I think, for the Trump administration as it relates to coronavirus is that he just doesn't care. He thinks this whole thing is just a big hoax, and he, was sort of poo-pooing the masks, and he's got no real interest in staying locked down and all that stuff. And so now that he has it, when he has that position and he's never had the virus or been impacted by it, people think he's just being calloused, like he's just this machismo kind of guy who is not afraid of anything. But now that he does have it, that sort of strongman facade starts to fade away, and that may make him a little bit more empathetic. Now, again, that's all just political speculation, but we will see what happens. All right, let's change gears a little bit. The second story I want to talk to you about today. Breonna Taylor, we know that her transcripts, the grand jury recordings, and the evidence of what happened during those secret proceedings, they were released today. We didn't have an opportunity because they were just released several hours ago to listen to them all, because it's 15 to 20 hours or so of recordings. It's interviews with witnesses, audio of 911 calls. We've got the evidence that was actually presented by the prosecutor's offices over to the grand jurors, and that's about it. We really wanted to see what were the conversations that were taking place between the prosecutors, between Daniel Cameron, between another woman named Barbara Maines Whaley, who is the assistant attorney general. What were they telling the grand jurors? We don't think it's much. We didn't think it was much, and now we know we're not even going to find out, because they didn't include any of that in the grand jury recording. So we have here a quick summary of what we were able to gather. Recordings run 15 to 20 hours long, include interviews with witnesses, 911 calls, other evidence, but they do not include statements or recommendations from prosecutors about which charges they think should be brought against the officers. So that's the entire point of why we wanted these recordings and these transcripts. We wanted to know, and we've analyzed it sort of ad nauseum on this channel, what did Daniel Cameron and his office tell the grand jurors? Did they indicate that there was other possibilities for other charging decisions for the other officers? And the answer was no. It sounds like they were told that the prosecutors who made their presentations had already decided that they were not going to present this evidence. They just said, Mattingly, Cosgrove, those two officers who were responsible for actually hitting their bullets into Breonna Taylor's body, as far as we know, they exercise self-defense. Therefore, they're not even allowed to be, there's not even a discussion about charging them, because we've already concluded that it's self-defense. So we're not going to present those options to you. Okay, it's like dealing with a 5-year-old. If a 5-year-old wants to have cupcakes for dinner and you have cupcakes in the fridge, you don't present the cupcakes to your 5-year-old. You present the chicken and the broccoli and all of the healthy stuff, and you say, hey, here you go. I'm going to present to you these options. Does the child know that they have that option to go pick the cupcake out? Because if they knew about it, they might do that. Same thing here. Daniel Cameron, the AG's office from Kentucky, they presented the evidence that they wanted the grand jurors to get. They left out the other stuff. And now when the grand jurors are coming around and saying, we wanted some of that other stuff. We had the grand juror who wants to come out and wants a statement of his rights so that he can actually go public with some of this stuff. Daniel Cameron turns around and says, whoa, 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 you guys were an independent body. You guys could have done whatever you wanted to do. The fact that you didn't investigate any other charges, that's on you. That's not on us. And so we don't even get to hear what was taking place there. Now we have some other interesting things that came out of this. We know that this is another woman. Her name is Barbara Maines Whaley. She's the assistant AG. And the first witness was an investigator for the AG's office. So this woman here handled a large part of the presentation to the grand jurors. And one of the first witnesses was somebody who was an investigator for the AG's office, which is not unusual. They usually have full-time investigators, on staff, or at least they contract with, to go and investigate certain types of crimes. And so this person came, they presented photos, videos, body camera videos. Wait a minute, they presented body camera videos in the grand jury proceedings? I thought Daniel Cameron told us on a recorded statement that we played on this channel that they didn't have any body camera footage. We learned a few days after his dishonest statement that Vice obtained body camera footage that showed a good portion of this situation. They showed Kenneth Walker walking back out with his hands out and a dog ready to rip his head off. We saw a lot there. But Daniel Cameron told us this stuff didn't exist, and we know it does. So it just, where there's smoke, there's fire. If he's going to be dishonest about one particular type of evidence, who's to say that he's not being dishonest about all of it? So during the grand jury proceeding, Barbara Maines Whaley does present body camera evidence, even though we were told it doesn't exist. They showed body cameras from 3 officers who arrived after the shots were fired. Questioning was led by this lady. Grand jurors, interestingly, they asked questions. They said, Ms. Taylor's boyfriend, they wanted to know, had he been named in the search warrant? And he had not. They wanted to know what exactly the officers saw as soon as they opened the door. They wanted to know whether the officers were executing a warrant, whether they were aware that they had already found Jamarcus Glover, who was actually the guy that they were really after. They were at the wrong apartment, essentially. Who was the target of the original illegal drug investigation? So Glover and Ms. Taylor's ex-boyfriend, he was already in custody at the time they raided Breonna Taylor's apartment, and the jurors' questions suggested that they were skeptical about what they were being shown. One asked about timestamps on the video. Another asked why they had not seen the room where the guns were found. The investigators said that would be shown in a different video. And so all of this, the jurors are asking good questions, but the prosecutors who are in control of the presentation, who have that evidence, they're the ones who are really dictating where the conversation is going. They know about the cupcake in the refrigerator, but they're not going to tell them about it because they don't want them to move forward with the indictment. So I think there's going to be more evidence that comes out, certainly from the grand jury transcripts and the recordings, but kind of not really, because the stuff that we wanted to know was in particular about what the prosecutors themselves presented to the grand jury. What were their statements? What was Barbara Maines Whaley's statement? What was she saying to these people? What was Daniel Cameron saying to these people? If we're only going to get to see the evidence and we don't get to see any of the persuasion or any of the conversations that took place about what to do with the evidence, then what's the point of hearing the grand jury recordings? We know what most of the evidence says. That's not the issue. The issue is, why weren't these cops indicted? Why didn't the grand jury do it? If it's because the AG, through Barbara Maines Whaley and through Daniel Cameron, if they just dissuaded them from bringing the charges because they didn't present the evidence, aren't they also culpable for that? Do we need another indictment proceeding? The whole thing is just is really gross behavior. Now, we're going to know more about this stuff, but I'm not really confident that there's going to be another bombshell or really any good information until the judge, or until somebody in this case gets a copy of, or the judge orders the release of, or we get clarification from that grand juror who hired an attorney asking for a clarification of his rights. Until we get the full recordings, the full transcripts of these grand jury proceedings, it's still going to be just the selective evidence being displayed to us at the discretion of the government. They're just going to give us these little bits and pieces and finally hope that we say, okay, enough already, we got it all, and they're just going to move on and continue to bury this thing. So we also learned a little bit more about the warrant. Breonna Taylor's warrant situation is a little bit confusing. We still are waiting for more information from the FBI, but if you're reading some of these different articles, it can be kind of hard to follow. So I diagrammed it out for you, how this is all working. And it's going to look like a lot. So when I switch over to this slide, just bear with me for a moment. So let's talk high-level stuff. Breonna Taylor's case, the people who showed up on her apartment and the officers who actually conducted the raid, they were part of the Louisville Metro Police Department, okay? Part of Louisville Metro, LMPD. There's another police agency close by called the Shively, I think that's how you say it, Shively Police Department. Okay, so when we go over to this slide, you're going to see that we have them diagrammed here. So these 4 individuals, Detective Mike Nobles, Detective Kelly Hanna, John Mattingly, and Joshua Janes, are all part of the Louisville Metro Police Department. We have these 2 other officers who are part of the Shively Police Department. We've got Sergeant Timothy Sawyer, and we have Detective Mike Kuzma. Okay, these are the 2 individuals in a separate police department. So here's what happened. We have John Mattingly, who is doing an investigation on this fellow Jamarcus Glover, who is Breonna Taylor's ex-boyfriend. He's doing this investigation, and he's trying to identify where packages are being delivered to where packages are going that are supposed to be delivered to Jamarcus Glover. And for some reason, he gets a tip that it's probably going to Breonna Taylor's home. Now, Breonna Taylor at this point in time is really disassociated with Jamarcus Glover. She is now living with Kenneth Walker, a new boyfriend. So John Mattingly is asking, what's going on here? I need to get information from the U.S. Postal Service, which is up here, the USPS, which is the federal government, the body that is entering or transmitting and delivering packages. The concept here is that there are drugs being shipped through the U.S. Postal Service. They're supposed to be going to Jamarcus Glover. They're being shipped through the U.S. Postal Service through Breonna Taylor, who's acting as a front person for Jamarcus Glover. And so they're trying to, they're basically trying to intercept that. So John Mattingly he's wanting to have this conversation with USPS, and he goes through this other officer called Joshua Janes. Joshua Janes and John Mattingly and these other officers, they're all interfacing with these two officers in order to get information about the U.S. Postal Service. So why do they need to go through a separate police department to go get any information about the Postal Service? Well, the reason being is because the Louisville Metro PD, they don't have a working relationship with the U.S. Postal Service. The U.S. Mail, they don't want anything to do with LMPD. There's not a lot of information about that, but there's just a falling out that happened at some point in time, and they don't want to work together. So they're not exchanging information. And this is not entirely unusual. I mean, you see this, these departments, there are hundreds and thousands of different police departments and different agencies. Some work together, some don't. Some have working relationships, some don't. Some have bad contracts. They don't data share. Whatever the reason was, they haven't told us yet. But Louisville Metro, they are not able to get information from USPS about whether they delivered any packages to Breonna Taylor's house, specifically drug packages. So John Mattingly says, hey, Joshua Janes, I need you to check and see what's going on. Are these packages being delivered? Of course, they can't know. So they go through this other police department who does tell them that there are no packages going over to Breonna Taylor's house. Okay, according to Sergeant Timothy Sawyer, according to Mike Kuzma, they've been checking with their source at the USPS. Nothing is being delivered. No suspicious packages. Nothing is going on. And that's it. Tells them multiple times. Tells these two officers, Detective Mike Nobles, Detective Kelly Hanna, tells John Mattingly. John Mattingly tells Joshua Janes. It's confirmed multiple times. There is no connection here. Nobody in this circle is able to make a connection, as far as we can tell. Now, this is still under investigation, and the judge is concerned about this also, but she's deferring to the FBI. But there's no connection here. Nobody knows that there's any packages that are illegal or suspicious even being delivered to Breonna Taylor's house. So why then does Officer Joshua Janes on March 12th, which is one day prior to the actual incident, the raid of Breonna Taylor's house, why does he, in the warrant that authorizes the raid itself, why does he write in there that we verified through a U.S. Postal Inspector that suspected drug dealer Jamarcus Glover has been receiving packages at Taylor's home? Why did he write that in an affidavit in order to secure the warrant? He's getting information from John Mattingly. He is submitting the warrant request up to Judge Mary Shaw. Judge Mary Shaw believes this fraudulent affidavit, issues the warrant. These people go and conduct the raid on Breonna Taylor's home. She is killed. So now what is going to happen to these people? What's going to happen to that guy? It's going to be interesting. Let's go through the timeline in a little bit more detail so you can understand. So now that we know who the parties are, now that we know who these officers are, let's look at the timeline just to break this down a little bit further. We can see here that mid-January, and remember, March 13th is where this incident happened. Breonna Taylor's apartment is raided. She's fatally shot March 13th. Previously, mid-January, Kuzma told Mattingly Glover had not received any packages from Breonna Taylor's apartment. So Kuzma, this person up here, told Mattingly, this guy, that there has been no deliveries here. The guy who knows about the U.S. Postal Service tells John Mattingly. 1 week later, Kuzma told the same thing to these two other detectives, Mike Nobles, Detective Kelly Hanna. Nobles was present at Breonna's apartment during the raid. Hanna was on the scene for Glover's warrant. So these two people went and executed warrants that day. One went over to Jamarcus Glover's, one went over to Breonna Taylor's home, but they also knew because Detective Mike Kuzma told them there was no packages being delivered at Breonna Taylor's house. We've got nothing there. Also told John Mattingly as well Then we have the raid. Then Sawyer on April 10th, so about a month after the raid takes place, Sawyer receives a text message from Janes asking if any packages had been delivered to Breonna's. Sawyer told him none had in the months before her death. So now these guys, Janes is coming back and he's like, oh shoot, I wrote a fraudulent warrant out here. So now I need to go check back with Sawyer and say, hey, you sure they didn't deliver anything back over there to Breonna Taylor's house? He says, yep, none had been delivered, none in the months before her death. Sawyer told the Public Integrity Unit investigators that after Breonna's death, that Kuzma asked Mattingly about the affidavit submitted to obtain a warrant, and they are all trying to figure that out right now. So, this is all of these different officers sort of pointing their fingers back and forth. We really don't know why that made it into that warrant. We really don't know what's going to happen now, because a large part of this is being held by the FBI. Now, the question then becomes what is going to happen? What's going to happen? What if, let's say, for example, in a hypothetical to sort of flesh out how this works, there's a concept called the fruit of the poisonous tree. If this officer, Janes, had actually lied about the warrant, which it's looking like he did, or if he falsified it or did something to it, what would happen? Let's say that in a different situation, this is a hypothetical, that Breonna Taylor did in fact have drugs and she wasn't killed, she was in fact arrested. Let's say that scenario happened. And we later learn that the warrant was fraudulent. What would happen is the criminal charges for drugs or for whatever they want to accuse her of in this fake hypothetical, those would all be thrown out, because that would be what's called fruit of the poisonous tree. You can't get that anymore. If the warrant is bad and they got something as a result of a bad warrant, you can't just suddenly take that. The penalty to the government for having a bad warrant is that the evidence that they found in violation of those rights must be thrown out now. So the fruit of the poisonous tree would apply there. But in this case, there's no criminal charges. Kenneth Walker was charged, but then those charges were dismissed. Breonna Taylor's dead, so can't charge her with anything. So if the penalty in a normal case of a bad warrant is that the evidence against that person and the criminal charges would be dismissed, what happens if there are no criminal charges? Well, now you have a wrongful death settlement. Breonna Taylor's family got $12 million. All right. But what happens to that officer? Is that officer going to be part of any sort of reprimand, formal reprimand, falsifying evidence fraudulently, signing for a warrant, or even by proxy causing Breonna Taylor's death to some extent? Is there anything there? We're going to see. Going to guess? Probably not. If this officer can attribute this thing to a mistake, if he can sort of justify it one way or the other, he can maybe bring it within the doctrine of qualified immunity, saying that we thought we had it right, this was a mistake, this wasn't malicious, therefore I didn't commit a crime, and because of our stupid qualified immunity laws, cops can get away with basically anything as long as they're within the purview of what they do. It's a really broad law. We talked about this with Amy Coney Barrett. We've talked about one of her opinions was actually kind of similar to a situation like this, where she found, in fact, that a lying cop who wrote a bad probable cause statement is not entitled to qualified immunity. So kind of similar to this, if she was deciding this case and she found out that this cop was lying, she may say that he's not entitled to qualified immunity and he can be sued civilly or charged criminally. Maybe. Or maybe she reads the case and says, yeah, it was an honest mistake, so he's good. Qualified immunity applies. Those are going to be good questions. I think it would be a very good question for somebody on the Senate Judiciary Committee to ask her, but they won't. They're going to ask her about Roe versus Wade. All right. So that's what's happening with the warrant. We will certainly continue to follow that along. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, because I don't think this case is going away anytime soon. I think the judge may actually ask that the full, unredacted, unedited grand jury transcripts be released. I would really like to see that, because what they released is missing the good stuff. It's like a hamburger with no meat. It's not any good. All right. Last story we want to get to today, because it is Friday and it's about that time, is Daniel Prude. So Daniel Prude we covered a while ago. This is one of the most sort of egregious cases that I think I've seen, at least in terms of callousness from the police. There's seven officers who were involved in this incident. We did a deep dive analysis on this entire video. If you remember, this is the scene that is one of the worst images in criminal justice that exists in in 2020, if not this decade. This is the scene from Daniel Prude's arrest, where you have these 4 officers here standing around. We have a naked black man who's sitting in the street, and they put a hood over his head, spit hood, and they end up actually laying on him, and he died 7 days later. So what happened was, well, we're going to get into it a little bit, but he's on the ground. He's having a medical health emergency. He's coming off of drugs. He's naked. He's running around the streets. He's not violent. He's in handcuffs. He's really not even spitting at them until they put the hood on. He spits like one time, some gum out or something. Then they put the hood on him. Then he starts spitting to try to get the hood out of his mouth. Really, really, really bad. As these cops are going around the situation, they're sort of joking at him. They're doing this call and response thing with him. Really, really bad video. I would love to see the cops held accountable for this. Unfortunately, we're not seeing much activity on it. So the 7 officers were involved in the incident in March. The video came out sometime, I think, in September when the video was released, and then they were all suspended with pay. So the 7 officers who were involved in this man's death, suspended without pay, and they now have attorneys who made a statement today, I believe it was, that they're coming out and they're saying that their officers are being treated unfairly. They said being mistreated. They said their clients only followed the proper training procedures and protocols, despite the fact that the autopsy report says that there were complications of asphyxia in the setting of physical restraint. So the attorneys for these cops, they come out and they say, no, this was due to the PCP in his system. They're requesting their own autopsy report from their own investigators, and they're really sort of denying that the actual officers, doing a full body plank on his neck, which we're going to show you in a minute, that didn't have anything to do with him dying. Had only to do with his PCP. So I was listening to these arguments from these defense attorneys, and well, let's just listen to them. Let's see what you have to think about them, because they are interesting arguments.
On the early morning of March 23rd, say about their client's conduct.
These officers did exactly what they were trained to do.
Okay.
And they did it flawlessly. It is unfortunate and it is a tragedy that Mr. Prude passed away, but it's not, as best we can tell, in any relationship to the actions that the officers took on the night in question.
The medical examiner's report says
so watch
Prude died
this.
from complications of asphyxia
so he's in a hood at this
setting
point.
Of physical restraint, as well
Those
as
are an officer's 2 hands.
PCP. Today, lawyers say they don't know why asphyxia is listed, and they're having their own medical professionals
right
look
around
into
his neck
it.
and his head.
People may die from positional asphyxia on an accidental basis, but this happens most often when the mouth and the nose are blocked, or where the chest may be unable to fully expand.
Watch.
At no point in this video, when you watch it, is his nose or mouth blocked.
They also showed an RPD training.
He had a
video
hood on his head.
called segmenting, used by the officers that night.
The officers involved in this incident did not cause his death. They correctly deployed the segmenting defensive tactic that they received training in. The effects of Mr. Prude's voluntary use of PCP are the root cause of what happened here.
They also addressed what they call misconceptions.
All right, enough of that propaganda nonsense. So these 2 defense attorneys are out there saying that this was all by the book, nothing wrong there. None of this was as a result of any damage from the police. It's all about PCP. And by the way, he didn't even have anything. He had nothing covering his mouth and his nose. People only die when they have something covering his mouth and his nose. Did he see the video? Did he see any of the photographs that we saw? So here is an actual screen clipping that we covered last time on this channel. This is Daniel Prude laying on the ground. This is his shoulder blade. Okay, this is his shoulder. This is his traps right here. This is this officer's hand literally around his neck. This is the top of his head. He's got a hood all over his head. The hood covers your mouth and your nose. It's a spit hood so that you can't spit. So for that defense attorney to come out and say there was nothing covering his mouth and his nose, the guy is just lying. I don't know how a defense attorney could say that, quite frankly. That we can see it. It's covered. Now he can come back out and say, well, it's a limited covering and it's meant to allow air to pass through, and so we don't count that as a covering or whatever it is. The guy has a piece of fabric over his mouth and his nose. I don't know how to qualify that other than his face and his face and his nose are being covered. Now on this other angle, so this is from the officer who is literally, has both hands around his neck. These other officers, if you take a look at this other angle from another officer with a body camera on, he is doing a full body plank on his neck. full body plank. And that we counted that. It goes like well over a minute, 2 minutes. It's a long period of time. And you can hear Daniel Prude literally vomiting and throwing up, a mucus. You can hear him gasping for air and basically having his entire neck and head and esophagus and everything just being crushed down because he's under the body weight of a full officer, a full grown man, officer man with his hands around his neck doing a full plank on his head. And these defense attorneys come out and say that basically none of this ever happened. So, outstanding that they have the cojones to get up there and tell you that what you saw in the video is just not accurate. I mean, you heard them. How they can come to that conclusion with a straight face, I have no idea. So people are rightfully upset about this stuff. We've got, protesters. We've got a statement from Reverend Lewis Stewart, who's the president of the United Christian Leadership Ministry. He's got some, fairly good points here. He says their statements must still be questioned. So they're saying that they stand on the basis of police procedure. Segmenting on the ground was perfect. So this is what the police always do. They love to go back to their policies and procedures and say, hey, well, no. We were just following procedures. The statements must be questioned. It resolves nothing. He says that Mr. Prude was naked. They failed to cover him. They could have given him a blanket that would have shielded him from the elements. They didn't do that. They suffocated him with a spit bag. He was brain dead on arrival at the hospital. He died in the custody of the Rochester Police Department. The medical examiner determined his death to be a homicide. And so, it's pretty obvious, I think, in my mind, that his death was primarily caused by an officer doing a full plank on his head for 2 minutes and other officers laying on his body. Protesters, they're demanding a lot. They want everybody fired, all of the officers involved. They want them fired. They want to drop the charges against all the protesters. They want Daniel's law that would prohibit police from responding to mental health calls. The state must ensure that an emergency response system that puts trained mental health providers in the lead to respond in direct care and so on and so forth. Immediate resignation of a bunch of people, defund and demilitarize the RPD. So that's it for Daniel Prude. I would love to see those cops also indicted. Would love to see it. I think if you watch the full video that we did on that, we saw an extreme example of man's inhumanity to man. These guys were laughing at him. These guys were upset that he was naked and that he had, some feces on him. They were really grossed out by the whole situation, and they treated him literally like a piece of garbage, and they ended up killing him. They could have handled the situation a million different ways. And then, if you remember, once the medical medical providers, they show up, they say, "Oh well, you guys just had to protect yourself. You guys just had to take care of yourself. It's a tough job out there. Yeah, you had a guy who was naked, hallucinating on drugs, literally naked in the street, in handcuffs, in a spit rag, head covering, and you killed him. But probably justified because it's very dangerous out there. Very, very dangerous. All right, so let's take a look at some of the comments. How is everybody today? Let's take a look at some of the comments. What do you think about some of these stories? Very varied. All right. Let's take a look at the chat. So Gigi, hey Gigi, I have something for you here. Thank you for talking about, you've been talking about how you don't get as many subscribers as you hope. The reason is that your content is not bad. It's quite the opposite. The reason is the amount of posts you make. Your frequent posts clutter everybody's feed. If you want to increase your subscriber count, I'd make a separate channel for those. And so Gigi, I actually had a conversation about that, and we are going to make some changes on this channel because I had the same feeling myself. I thought that maybe we were posting too many clips and too much content. We switched over to the live show about 2 weeks ago because there's so much stuff to talk about and so much stuff going on. I just wanted to, just to be here and sort of be available and record all this stuff for the record. But you're right, it is way too much. So we are going to rethink that. We're going to actually scale back down a lot of the clips, probably only do the live show and then maybe 3 clips on this channel. And then we're also going to talk about taking our law firm's content and actually sort of segmenting that out on a different channel. So I really appreciate that feedback, actually. It got me thinking. I was already thinking that because we were posting so much stuff, but I just didn't have any good feedback. And I actually learned a lot. I looked at some other people's channels and how they do things. And so I really appreciate the feedback because we are going to make some changes because I agree with you. I think it's probably too much. If you watch the show and you get a notification for 10 clips that all came from the show, it's probably too much. So we're trying to figure this thing out. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the understanding on it, because we're learning this on the fly, and we're going to be making mistakes. So thanks for understanding, and thanks for the suggestion. I really do appreciate that. All right. You need to get on Tim Pool, somebody said, which is funny because that was really actually somebody whose channel I was looking at. Tim Pool has 3 channels, and I was always wondering, why does he have so many channels? Why doesn't he just have one channel? Well, then I learned that it's because he makes a video like every hour of the day. So he's got, 10 hours of content every day, and so he splits it up across different channels. And once I saw that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. So we're actually gonna pull some of that model, I think, from his channel and some of these other channels, just to get our stuff organized a little bit, because I know that people here who are joining us on this chat, they're not particularly interested in Arizona law. I would say they're not really too concerned about how to beat an Arizona DUI charge, which is what our law firm does, but you are interested in more of this topical news, criminal justice reform stuff. So we're gonna make a little bit more of a clean split there, and I appreciate that. Definitely don't always agree with you, but you are one of the only people who I see who aren't delusional on here. Thanks, Mike D. And I appreciate that. To be honest, I don't even agree with myself a lot of the time, So we're just kind of doing a lot of analysis on the fly, and my opinions are going to evolve, and I'm learning a lot as we're doing this show. It's actually been a lot of fun because I'm learning a lot about these things that otherwise I sometimes wouldn't do as deep of a dive in, And so it's been fun. I appreciate it. Appreciate the feedback. Appreciate you being here. At R&R Law Group. So this comes from Jack of Trades. McGinnis also did a 10 Things I Love About Jews video. Does that mean he's totally fine? I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that. I talked about his 10 Things I Hate About Jews video yesterday, or mentioned it. I didn't play it or anything like that. But, look, I understand people needing to be a provocateur. I understand being provocative. I get that. But there's just some things that I'm just not comfortable endorsing. In any of those general, stereotype types of arguments about the Jews, or, anything in particular. It's too hot. It's too much. And I think it's certainly provocative. He's got a big name. Everybody's talking about him, so it's working for him. But it's just not something I'm comfortable endorsing, or I didn't even really particularly want to talk about it. So if you want to find any kind of mistake, you will. What we all ignore is the 99999 out of 100 million times that our societies are, where it goes right. Okay, so some other questions. What else we got? I understand your concern, but he isn't. You don't have to endorse him. Just don't assume too much because it's unfair. I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. I really don't know much about the guy, or about the Proud Boys, or about that movement. I really don't know much about it. But what we were able to discuss on this channel, I think the characterization of them as being a white supremacist group is just without any evidence. I don't think there's any evidence of that anywhere. We saw point blank that the president of the organization is an Afro-Cuban who's not even a Caucasian person. And my real point on that was, we were talking about the debates in the context of Chris Wallace asking Donald Trump to disavow the Proud Boys, but we haven't been talking about the Proud Boys ever. We're all talking about Antifa and BLM, so why didn't that same question go over to Joe Biden? Why didn't he disavow those people? So the other point of that is, when you call literally everybody a white supremacist, I've been called a white supremacist, I've been called a racist on this channel in the comments, and I'm certainly don't identify in that way. I disavow white supremacy. I disavow all of that. But when you start accusing everybody of being a white supremacist, really nobody's a white supremacist anymore. And it really waters down the term, and it's not okay. It's not a good thing to do. So I would like to see less of that. I would like to see more, actual journalism. And if Chris Wallace is going to ask Donald Trump to call out his side, ask the Democrats to call out their side as well. Because in my mind, from what I've been seeing on the news every day on this show that we've been covering it, we're seeing a lot of Antifa, but not a lot of Proud Boys burning down buildings and looting stores. So, they're not the same thing in my mind. Why would anyone call you that? Well, it's because that's what happens. You just get called things. I try to have a fair conversation and just go through the facts as I see them, and with some limited analysis here and there. But if people don't like you, they're going to call you a name, and it's okay. That's part of being a criminal defense attorney, quite frankly. You know, a lot of people think that we are representing the scum of the earth. We're representing the dregs of society. How could you possibly represent a criminal? What kind of a person are you? And the fact is that these are people that we're working with. They're 99.9% of them are really good people. They just were in one bad situation. They screwed up. They did something. You know, they were in a bad relationship. They were in a bad, something happened in their lives, and they're not awful people. Their fathers, their mothers, their sons, their brothers, their siblings, and these people just want to get their lives back on track, and we help them do that. So I'm used to being called names. It's okay. Doesn't bother me. So Craig Podgurski says, I'd be interested in AZ Law. I'm just down the street from your firm. Scottsdale friend, good to see you, my man. Is he African-American Cuban? I think they're talking about the Proud Boys national president. I think he is Afro-Cuban. At RR Law Group, how do you think Trump getting COVID will affect his re-election chances? This is a great question. Let me answer this. I have a slide for this that I did not cover today in the interest of time, but I want to show you it. So I read this book. It's a marketing book, and it's called Building a Story Brand. It's written by Donald Miller. And when I saw the news that Donald Trump had COVID-19, I instantly thought of this. I thought this idea that this may be the president's third act. And I know this is a little political and not necessarily criminal justice related, but indulge me for a minute. So I have two slides from this book. It's called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And this is what he talks about. He talks about when you're in marketing, when you're in sales, when you're doing things in your life, you can structure it in a way that sort of fits a story narrative. And he goes back through in this book some of the best stories that we've ever heard. He talks specifically about Star Wars. He talks about the Hunger Games. He talks about some of the other ones, Lord of the Rings, these trilogies that have these building up of a character, and then they have, some calls to action. They have a major problem that's a climax. They have a potential win and a potential loss and all of that. So he organizes it into this chart that looks like this, and it's called the story brand sort of chart here. So let me show you how this works. So this is from the book, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And is this the president's third act is what I'm asking. So we have a character who has a problem. He meets a guide who gives them a plan. The plan calls them to action. And then in that action, they can either succeed or they can go into failure. Okay. When we take this over to Star Wars, you have Luke, right? Luke has internal struggles. Is he a Jedi? That's his internal struggle. External, he must defeat the Empire. And then the philosophy, is he good versus evil? He meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is his sort of guide. He lived as a Jedi. Then he learns something. He learns to trust the Force. Then he must go defeat the Empire. If he wins, he's going to save the rebellion. But if he loses, the rebellion is crushed. And when you are looking at, let me get that, the rebellion is crushed. So when you're looking at this type of narrative, what we're seeing here, I think is a very similar trajectory for the president in my mind. This is something where we have Donald Trump who has all of these struggles going on. I don't know that he's going to meet a master or anything, but he is going to go into this area of solitude, and he is now, having to live with himself in the world. He's going to learn some new skills. And then when he emerges out of this thing, we're going to see sort of the third act. What is he going to do? Is he going to be a changed person, a reformed person? Is he going to show up to that second debate? Is he going to survive this thing? What is the story going to be? But he's set up for this pivotal moment in the campaign. And when I saw this, I thought, oh my gosh, literally he announced it on October 1st. It's like the first day, of October. We always talk about October surprises. This is an October surprise for sure. Not something that I think was, willfully created or, disclosed upon the public for any real political purpose, right? Donald Trump has been out there flying around all over the country, doing rallies and meeting with people, shaking hands, kissing babies, doing the political thing. So now he caught this, but it's this weird moment where, we've got 2 weeks where he's going to be in quarantine. That's going to put us right in the middle of October. then we're going to have another 2 weeks until it's really crunch time for voting. And so this is going to be a really, really interesting time. It's going to be interesting to see what he does with it. And it just reminded me of this building a story brand concept. I mean, if he utilizes it effectively, if what we see from some of these other people, these other leaders around the world who have, come out of the coronavirus situation with positive, momentum, with increased approval ratings and those types of things, if Donald Trump has that, it may be enough to tip the scales and secure him another 4 years. All right, a couple other questions. We have, would you consider doing a series of videos showing a successful defense and break it down for everyone, possibly with courtroom footage, just so we can see more of what you do? Is it public domain? Yeah, hey, Benny, yeah, there's a ton of videos on this channel. So before I started doing the Watching the Watchers show, I actually there's probably 400 or 500 videos that are just analyzing what we do and how we do it. So I have DUI videos. I have an unboxing of a DUI blood tube test kit, and I show you what's in it and how it all works. I've got I used to make these whiteboard videos where I would just write all the laws on the whiteboard and show you. So there's a ton of content on this channel. It's all specific for Arizona. I'm going to start making more of that content, but I think what we're going to do is segregate that onto a different channel because I just think it's for a different audience. I know most of you who are watching very likely have not been charged with a crime in Arizona, so you don't particularly want to see that stuff. That stuff can go onto a different channel, and we'll get that sorted out. But yeah, I love the idea. I mean, the purpose of starting a YouTube channel in general was to give people more information about how this stuff works, because most lawyers, they like to hide the information behind their fee. If you hire me, sure, I'll give you a ton of information. Sure, no problem. But that kind of puts the consumer, the person who needs the help, at a major disadvantage because they don't know what they're getting until after they've signed that contract. So if they sign that contract and the lawyer really doesn't know what they're talking about, or the lawyer doesn't have good values, or they don't have a good team, or they don't have a good, philosophy for how they handle a criminal defense case, then that consumer, the client, the person who actually needs the help, is getting underserved. And so I wanted to put as much information as humanly possible that I could produce and develop here at our law firm on the internet so that people could understand how it works and then make a decision. They could watch me first. They could watch the information. They could say, okay, that looks solid. I like that philosophy. I like that idea. Maybe I'll decide to work with that firm. And the idea that we give value first has been great for our firm, because people recognize that we're not that law firm that is going to tell you a bunch of stuff and try to hide everything behind the scenes until you pay our fee. We'll tell you, we'll be as helpful as we can possibly be at the outset. If you decide that you want to work with our team, great, we're going to be here to help you. And it's been very good for our firm. And I would sort of advise anybody in any business, in any industry, to ask that question. How am I delivering value? Am I being somebody who is being useful, or am I being somebody who's being, selfish, and I'm just really interested in getting this person's money, closing their case as quickly as we can, or, fixing their car with substandard parts, or digging that trench, not too deep, just bare minimum. Are you really giving value? Are you really being useful? And that's what we try to do on this channel. And so, if you want to check some of that stuff out, there's a lot on this channel. We are going to be reshooting a lot of those videos for the law firm's channel. And then also, by the way, I wrote a book about it. So I wrote this whole book called Beginning to Winning: How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. And it's not just, fluffy language. Like, I give you what I call my 9-step strategy sheet. So let me just show you this real quick. It's a 9-step strategy sheet. So you can actually go through the different phases of a criminal case. So from building trust, setting goals, developing, mitigation, going through discovery, interviews, pleadings, negotiations, advocacy, and a result. And we actually go through that entire framework, which I created and which we use here. It's been very helpful, and that's available on Amazon. So you can check that out. Zulu Zite, hey man, good to see you. He says those basic law videos are awesome. I devoured them. Having a second channel is a good idea. This one has become too hard to navigate. Yeah, and I appreciate that feedback, Zulu. It's been something that it's been kind of nagging at me because we're producing a lot more now. We built a whole studio we got a new office. I built a whole studio just so I can come in here and just, deliver as much value as I can, but it's a lot of content, and we've been trying to figure out how to sort it out, and I think we've got a solution in mind. So thanks for that. How likely, so somebody asked about Kyle Rittenhouse, how likely is it that Kyle Rittenhouse's lawyer's writ of habeas corpus will actually prevent his extradition? Is it true that we'd have that he'd have to be a non-juvenile detention center in Wisconsin? It's a good question. So I don't know the ins and outs of Wisconsin extradition law. Generally, habeas corpus motions are difficult to win, and I think it's going to be difficult for them to win in this case. I'm not real sure that the extradition, the idea that they want to prevent extradition, I'm not real sure that that is the best move. And the only reason I say that is because what we saw, there was another case that we covered here. Her first name was Crystal, I believe, and she also was charged with murder, and she also had a $2 million bond. And in Wisconsin, she was also being prosecuted by Mike Gravely, and he is the head prosecutor for Kenosha County, or whatever that county is called. And they reduced that other woman's, after 2 years in custody, I think it was a $2 million bond. They reduced it down to $400,000. She was able to secure those funds and actually get released out of custody. So Kyle Rittenhouse, in his current situation in Illinois, based on the law that we went through, if he stays in Illinois, unless this habeas motion is successful, then he's going to stay in custody until he is extradited. So if he was extradited immediately, there may be an option to actually go forward and ask the Wisconsin judge, which has already got some precedent in releasing somebody for a lot lower bond amount, 400 versus the 2 million. There's precedent in Wisconsin. So if they transferred Rittenhouse back over to Wisconsin at that point in time, would he also be able to get a similar bond? He could certainly raise, $400,000. I'm sure of that, and then get out of custody while the case is pending. So that may be, that's sort of a let's get him out of custody early approach versus John Pierce and Ellen Wood, and they've, in my mind, they're kind of dragging this thing a little bit. He asked for another. John Pierce asked for another 30 days for Kyle Rittenhouse. I thought he should have had his habeas petition already done. I thought he should have already had his request for all of his permissions for the electronic use of equipment and all that stuff. Should have all been done early, and it just wasn't. So hard for me to comment on that case because I'm not the attorney assigned to it. But from what I have seen, I got some questions about it. The habeas motion. The only reason I think that might be successful is because the prosecutor's probable cause statement in their own motion, or their own probable cause statement that they submitted in Kenosha, was written like it was written by a defense lawyer. I mean, there's huge holes in it in every paragraph. So doesn't even look like a really justified probable cause statement in my mind. So if they take that statement that the prosecutors in Kenosha wrote and they present that to an Illinois judge, are they going to, will an Illinois judge or an Illinois court look at that and say, yeah, this is a really weak statement? If these facts were presented in an Illinois court, would they even hold him in custody? If the answer under Illinois law is no, they wouldn't, and that is not even enough to bring charges, then the extradition is worth it. But I'm just not up to speed on those laws there. All right, so let's see. Anything else? Have you ever considered getting involved with politics as far as reforms? We need people who think with reason, objectiveness, as someone like yourself. And that's from Jacob Meza. Jacob, that is such a nice compliment. Thank you for even mentioning that. I have thought about it. It's something that I don't know that I have the patience to not speak my mind on the issues. If there was an opportunity for me to continue to, be forthcoming and authentic and speak what is in my heart, then I think I would be open to that. But I'm not sure that our political system allows for that anymore. I'm just not sure of it. If it, maybe at some point in the future, it's not on my roadmap anytime soon, but I am super passionate about these issues, and I would love to see some movement. It's really the reason we started this show, is to have this conversation on a higher level so that more people can get involved. Because defense attorneys, we sit around all the time and talk about this stuff, right? Myself, the team here, the attorneys, we'll have a Friday afternoon and we'll just be sitting around and we'll just be talking about all the problems in the justice system. Prosecutors do this, police officers do this, judges do this. It's all wrong. Good people are being thrown away. It's a terrible thing. So we can sit around in our little circle and talk about it all day long. But the point of this show and the power of YouTube and the internet is we want to take that conversation out. Because when there's other people who are involved in it, when there's other people thinking about these things, thinking about, hey, those people that everybody just throws away and calls them criminals, those are people, those are good people. Maybe we can help them. Maybe we can, help them get their lives back on track. And so we want to have this conversation in the public so that ideally the public is now bringing down some pressure on our local politicians to make some real moves that are going to actually impact some lives. Yeah. Joe, just Joe. Good decision on politics. Why risk the chance of getting lynched by your constituents? Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot out there. The political world right now, I don't know that it sounds particularly appetizing. And it's a shame because you would think that good people out there who want to get involved would look at that and say, gee, I don't want to put myself through that. I don't want to put my family through that. I mean, look at what both of these candidates are going through. It's not good. And Jack of Trades, R&R Law Group, I would absolutely love it if we could save everyone, but I don't think we can. We can certainly try. All right, everybody. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for being here. We're going to be back here next week. We're going to wrap up today. We'll be back here next week on Monday at 4 p.m. Arizona time. We'll do 7 p.m. Eastern time, same place, same location. Would love it if you shared the show with your friends. We are going to be making some changes to the channel, less frequent posts of the clips, more consolidated content. We're going to make it easier to navigate, move some stuff over to a different channel. So I want to thank you for your feedback, truly. I mean, I was not real sure what I was going to do with that, but your feedback nudged me in the right direction. So thank you for that. Have an awesome weekend, a great Friday. I'll see everybody next